What is up, everyone? I am back and I am coming at you with another mock draft video ready to talk some fantasy football. So, I'm really excited because, first and foremost, we're only 2 weeks away from the start of the NFL season, which means we're 2 weeks away from the start of fantasy football. Now, that means a lot of you have got your drafts coming up these next few days or maybe this weekend. So, check this out. I think the team that I put together here is a really good one. And the second reason why I'm really excited is because this is going to be the first auction draft that I'm putting together. Now, I've done a lot of these in the past before, so don't worry. I've definitely got the experience. And I know these auction drafts are becoming a little bit more popular, and there's those select few of you that really are into this type of drafting. So keep a lookout. I'm going to put together some more of these auction videos, but in the meantime, let's get right into it. Now, before we get into this player analysis, I kind of want to do a little bit of a breakdown between the auction draft format and the standard snake draft. Now, for those of you that aren't too familiar with this format, let me just do a little bit of a breakdown. And as far as what the auction draft is, it's pretty similar as to what you would expect. You've got all of your players, and each one is worth a different amount of money. And that amount is determined based on the rankings. So guys like David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell are going to be the most expensive guys. Now, every single person participating in this league starts off with a set amount of money. Now, for example, in this ESPN mock draft, everyone starts out with $200, and that is the amount of money that you have to fill out your entire roster. So, theoretically, you can spend a lot of your money on the top couple of guys, but then be at an issue with how am I going to put together a decent roster with only $50 left. And at the same time, though, this is kind of the unique thing because with auction drafts, there is no limitation. Everyone can technically have a guy like David Johnson. There are no rounds, there are no first pick, second pick, last pick. Everyone can have their favorite player and their top guy, but they just have to be willing to spend the money. So that's something that a lot of people like. And, I definitely understand that having the ability to select your favorite player no matter what is pretty awesome. But at the same time, I think sometimes that is a little bit of a pitfall because, like I said before, you can fall into that trap and then really have an imbalanced team in the long run. But with that being said, now I kind of want to talk a little bit of strategy because I think with these auction drafts, there's definitely a lot more strategy than some standard drafts. Now, first and foremost, what do I mean by that? Well, you can either, like I mentioned before, upfront spend a lot of your money on the top guys and maybe have a roster of three guys that are all studs, guys like, Bell, uh, Odell Beckham, and Jordy Nelson, and then uh, have the rest of your roster pretty far off in terms of talent and production. But some people do like to do that. But on the other hand, you can kind of try and sit back, wait for some of the storm to calm, and then have a lot of the money and be able to control the board in terms of who you're going to pick and setting that price for that person. Now, what I personally like to do is the latter. I don't want to spend a lot of money right in the beginning. Um, but at the same time, you're kind of going to see with a lot of these auction drafts, with uh, these videos that, no matter whose video you're watching, it's going to be very biased. And what I mean by that is, you know, with these auction drafts, since you can pretty much select whoever you like, people are tending to select their favorite players and the players that they think are going to have the best fantasy seasons. So because of that, the team that you're going to put together here maybe won't have as much of a balanced roster as it would in a snake draft, where you're really looking for value there and kind of the best available player. But here, it's more pick your favorite guys, and your roster at the end really reflects that. So just keep that in mind. When I'm selecting this roster, it's going to be pretty easy to see that some of these guys I just value very highly, and I'm all right with having them on my team versus other guys. And there's going to be a lot of you know comments about, oh, well, you should have taken this guy or that guy. And I understand that, but when it's all said and done, every single auction draft is going to be very form fitting to the person that's making it. So enough of that spiel. However, let's actually get into this player analysis. And just a quick disclaimer: for these drafts, they do tend to take a little bit longer than actual snake drafts. So for that reason, I'm going to fast forward and actually take you guys to my player selections and give you player analysis throughout. So don't worry, you won't miss out the picks, but this will just save a lot of time. Now, when I approach these drafts, these auction drafts, what I like to do is, I've said it before, have at least one stud on your roster. And this definitely applies to auction drafts more than standard ones, because in standard ones, you might find yourself in a situation where you've got the last pick and there's been already that drop off in players. You can't get one of the top receivers. You can't get one of those stud running backs. But here, that's the beauty of the auction draft. You can have anyone you want as long as you're willing to spend the price. So I identified my guys, and the guys that I really liked were Mike Evans, Jordy Nelson, and Melvin Gordon. Now, I knew that I couldn't have all three of them. I had to have only one. And the reason, some might be asking, why not David Johnson? Why not Le'Veon Bell? Well, the reason for that is because both those guys are the two most expensive guys at 66 and 67 bucks. But on top of that, you expect there to be a little bit of a bidding war with those guys, because a lot of the people participating in these drafts are going to want them. It's natural. They're going to be the top two players in fantasy, but I'm personally not ready in an auction draft to spend more than a third of your money available on only one player, which is what would happen if you went with David Johnson or Le'Veon Bell. So instead, I'm going to go with a guy in Mike Evans that I really like. He had a great year last year. I think Jameis Winston is that dark horse for the MVP. So I'm going to go with Mike Evans. He's going to have Deshaun Jackson opposite of him to take away some of the attention. And he's ranked for $59. I get him for 60 bucks, pay a dollar more, but that's all right. I've got one of my studs. Now, after this point, I kind of start looking at the running back position, because like I said, Johnson and Bell have gone. So what am I going to do instead? I see a guy in Marshawn Lynch who I really like, and honestly, he reminds me a lot of Jay Ajayi. But one of the big differences is that Ajayi is ranked for $51, whereas Lynch is right around the $30 mark. So for me, two very similar players, both probably going to get over 1,000 yards, except Lynch is in a better offensive line, better team. And I think they'll both probably get close to double-digit touchdowns. So I was very ready to spend $20 less on a guy like Marshawn Lynch and have him on my team. So that's exactly what I did. And I spent 30 bucks on Marshawn Lynch, and already I've put together Lynch and Mike Evans on my team, and I'm really happy with that. I have, however, spent $90. So at this point, those thoughts in the back of your mind start acting up. Are you going to have enough money to put together the rest of your roster? And I would urge all of you to keep that in mind, because it's really easy to get overwhelmed and make a lot of selections at the beginning and then not have enough money to put together the remaining roster. And what I like to do is keep the players that I like in the back of my mind and continuously have a going, kind of bank as to whether I can actually afford those guys. And as I spend more money on one player, how that affects the other players that I can get. So, having said that, um, I still want to load up on running backs, and I'm going to take advantage of the whole Ezekiel Elliott suspension thing. So, whereas a guy that usually would have gone in the top three picks, probably has gone for about 60 something dollars, is now ranked for about $30. And I'm ready to pay that price. I'm going to get Ezekiel Elliott, going to spend 31 bucks on him because when he comes back from a suspension, whenever that is, um, it'll most likely be just in time for a playoff push. And when he is back, just think about it. You're going to have, in my case, Mike Evans, who's going to be a top five receiver, and then excuse me, Ezekiel Elliott, who's going to be a top three running back. So that's something really exciting, and I'm going to pull the trigger on that. So I spent 31 bucks on Ezekiel Elliott. Now, while I'm waiting for my next selection, a guy in Bryant and Matt Bryant comes up, and you know, uh, I like Bryant a little bit as a kicker. Usually, his bid is for $1, but I just outbidded by $1. Got him for $2 because I do like the Atlanta offense. I do think they'll score a decent amount of points, and Bryant's a pretty high volume kicker, so for that reason, I picked him up. That was a little bit of a sidetrack, and with that out of the way, let's actually get into my next legitimate pick, and that is Christian McCaffrey. So the reason I went with another running back is because obviously Zeke is going to be suspended for some point in time, so he will be on the bench. And during that time, I need another starting running back, and I thought might as well get Christian McCaffrey. Later, I can target a guy like Darren McFadden, but for now, let me get McCaffrey. Um, he has a lot of potential in Carolina. I could see him in the future, not now, being pretty similar to Le'Veon Bell, being both that stud as a catcher and as a runner. But right now, he's still got guys like Stewart and Cam himself vulturing a lot of red zone touchdowns. But you do have to like what you've seen in the preseason. I know it's only the preseason, but he's been featured a lot as a runner, and he's also looked good in the passing game. Pretty much caught everything that's been thrown to him. So I'm gonna go ahead take him in a PPR league. He's pretty valuable. So right now I've got Mike Evans, Marshawn Lynch, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, and then Matt Bryant. So I'm really liking this team, but at the same time, I'm under $100, and I really have to start thinking what I'm gonna do next. Now, this is where a good amount of time passes by, and I don't really make a selection, but the next player that I like is someone in Travis Kelce that I think is going to have a really good year. If for some reason Gronk gets hurt, Kelce is the next best tight end. And for that reason, I'm ready to spend some money on him. Don't quite spend 20 bucks on him, but I spend 18. And again, the funds are growing lower and lower. And you notice when that happens, you kind of have to stay put on your bids. You have to wait until your selection comes up and you get to nominate the guy that you really like. So keep that in mind. Again, that tends to extend your drafting process, but so far so good. The bulk of my roster is looking really good, and I'm going to try and even it out with a top-notch quarterback. Now, if you look at some of the top guys, Rodgers, Brady, they're going for around double of what a guy like Drew Brees is going. And I think when it's all said and done, Brees has a season in fantasy that might be better than what Tom Brady puts together. So for that reason, I'm going to roll the dice, spend 14 bucks on Drew Brees, and I'm really happy with that. Now, this is where I have to do a lot of waiting and fast forwarding through that. A guy that I've identified in order to fill my second wide receiver spot is Martavius Bryant. And with Bryant, you get Antonio Brown's, you know, teammate who, at some points when he was on the field, was playing even better than Antonio Brown was. Now, if for some reason Brown gets hurt, man, Martavius Bryant becomes the guy to own. and becomes a steal no matter where you got him. So kind of maybe a little bit of wishful thinking, but at the same time, I think Martavius Bryant again has a really big year. And with that, that kind of rounds out my roster. And I could sit through here and wait until it's my pick to get some of those bench players, but I think you get a lot of the knowledge even when I just fill out the top half of my roster, the main part of the roster that is. So now, as far as grading my performance and grading my roster, I'd probably say that I give my performance a B, maybe B minus, and then my roster a B, B plus. Now, the reason for the performance I could have done better is because I still do think I spent a lot of money in the beginning, and I would have been better served by holding on to some of that money and being able to really target any player that I want at a later point rather than an earlier one. But that's just me. Um, just know that I will put out future videos of these auction drafts where I kind of am on both extremes and judge where which situation is better and which roster is better. I think this was a pretty good representation of kind of the middle ground. But in terms of the roster itself, you still look at it: Breeze, Marshawn Lynch, Zeke, Mike Evans, Martavius Bryant, Travis Kelce, Christian McCaffrey. I actually, it's a pretty good roster within of itself, especially when Zeke comes back. Now, obviously, have to add a flex, and that's not too hard because a lot of the deeper guys get devalued in these auction drafts and can go for like $2 or $3, so no worries there. And the bench, well, the bench will get filled out with some subpar guys, but I do feel really strongly about the core of my roster, and barring any injuries, it's definitely a contender. So let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with my strategy? Do you like the team that I put together? Would you have targeted some other guys? Would you have spent some of this money differently? And as always, like, subscribe, and look out for future videos.